2025, what a year it has been, from the LA fires to corporate mergers to the tumultuous political shifts across the world, and of course the conspiratorial drama around everyone's favorite redacted president. Existing in this timeline has never been more exhausting. But if there's one singular thing that kept me sane in the mad world we live in, it is the movies I watch amidst all the chaos. My escape into fantasy, or worlds of heroes and villains, or the always exhilarating jump scares in horror. And so as the year comes to an end and I begin to reflect on all 96 new releases I watched over this year, I began to wonder if there was a singular trend or theme that tied them all together. What was 2025 in film really about? And the first trend that myself, along with so many other people, realized early on this year was the many dual performances we got throughout the year. So was 2025 the year of dual performances?
That's when everything changed. Multiples.
In the case of multiples, we exterminate every individual.
Many began to realize this trend around the release of Sinners in April of this year, but the trend actually kicked off with The Monkey, which featured Theo James as twin brothers whose rivalry surrounding a killer monkey led to many absurd deaths. And although this movie wasn't revolutionary with techniques around dual performances like some of the others, it was still fun to see a manic Theo James playing opposite a slightly less manic Theo James.
Why don't you vanquish it, huh, Bill?
You're smaller. You go.
And then you had Bong Joon-ho's Mickey 17, which had clones upon clones of Robert Pattinson, who dies in many absurd ways in this sci-fi political comedy, with Robert Pattinson doing the craziest accents I've ever heard him do. Ever wonder what a threesome would be like with your partner and your own clone? Well, you can be just as uncomfortable as I was watching this movie's weird takes on the concept of cloning. Out Tonight's was yet another movie featuring dual performances, with Robert De Niro playing two mobsters in the 1950s. I didn't watch this one mainly because my aversion to mob movies, sorry not sorry, but I'm sure De Niro was great playing two different versions of the same character he's played in every crime movie he's ever been in. And we of course had Sinners, the most prominent dual performance of the year that is bound to make a splash in awards season. Michael B. Jordan played the Smokestack twins in Ryan Coogler's vampire film, which ended up being my favorite movie of this past year. Jordan's performance only being one of the great many things that I loved about this film. Now those were just the main dual performance films that everyone was highlighting at the midpoint of the year, but when everyone else stopped paying attention, I couldn't help but keep seeing this trend as the year continued with Superman. And yes, David Corenswet's dual role here is only featured in the final 10 minutes of the film, but I'm still counting it as I'm sure we'll see Ultraman in a more bizarre fashion in the future of the DCU. On the indie side of things, we of course had Twinless starring Dylan O'Brien, and this one may not feature Dylan O'Brien acting across himself as the twin brothers he portrays in this film, as one of them does die before the events of the movie, but we still get to see the fun contrasting performances between straight Dylan O'Brien and gay Dylan O'Brien. Definitely check this one out if you haven't already.
Oh my god, were you just looking at my butt? No.
And last but not least, which yes, there was yet another dual performance this year, and that was in Predator Badlands. Elle Fanning joined the long list of individuals to play really fascinating synthetics in the world of Alien, and now by extension, the Predator franchise. And this one really hammered home to me that this just might be the year of dual performances, as it came truly as a surprise to me when watching this film in theaters. So upon realizing the absurd amount of films with dual performances in them, I began to wonder what other trends there were in Hollywood this year, and that led me to the question, was it the year of Stephen King?
When you look up at the night sky, it can tell you stuff about your future.
I already mentioned it once, and I'll bring it up again with The Monkey. Not only did it feature two Theo Jameses, but it was also the first of many Stephen King adaptations this year. This film is adapted from the King short story of the same name to moderate success. King's stories range vastly in tone and story, with this one taking a sillier turn in the world of horror. It may share more in common with the Final Destination franchise than other King stories, but it is a King adaptation nonetheless. Next up was The Life of Chuck, which adapted a more recent novella featured in King's anthology book titled If It Bleeds. I really like this short story, and Mike Flanagan has a perfect record in my eyes in adapting King's stories. This one was a much needed tonal diversion, as it is a life-affirming feel-good drama told in reverse. It has elements of fantasy and sci-fi in the first act, a wonderful dance number in the second act, and a quiet coming-of-age ghost story as the third. As one of my more anticipated films of the year, this one didn't disappoint me, but as it was much different from past Stephen King stories, I understood why this movie received mixed reactions. Along with this being the year of Stephen King, it was also the year for his alter ego, Richard Bachman, as we got 2 Bachman adaptations this year as well. Bachman's stories tend to be more cynical and cruel than Stephen King's stories. Yes, I know that might be hard to believe, but if you watch The Long Walk, I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's it, kid, that's it.
Second warning. Third warning.
This film took the spot as my favorite King adaptation of the year, and one of my favorite King adaptations to date. David Johnson once again proves that he is one of the best young actors working today, alongside Cooper Hoffman and the rest of the wonderful ensemble. This movie is dark, cruel, and more politically relevant than ever, yet it features one of the more heartbreakingly strong showcases of a camaraderie that you'll ever see. The other Bachman story to get an adaptation also happened to be a remake of The Running Man. The Arnold film from the 80s was quite a silly take on this story, but at least it kept some of the themes of propaganda that defined the novel. I was hoping to get a more serious and darker take similar to the novel, but Edgar Wright sat in the director's chair, which brought another fun, action-focused take on this story. And although it is probably the more commercially safe way to adapt this book, I was disappointed in its lack of the edge that the book had, especially in its third act. But it's still an Edgar Wright film, so there was still some fun to be had, and it was a lot more faithful to the book than the 80s adaptation. And you know what, hell, I'll also throw in The Black Phone 2, which was a sequel to an adaptation of Stephen King's son's short story, so it may be 2 layers removed from being a direct King adaptation, but for the sake of this video, it counts. But if not the year of dual performances or Stephen King adaptations, was it the year of blank check films from auteur directors?
There are no hands on the clock.
Why?
Because they're not needed.
What time is it?
You know, I don't remember that part. All right, let's just not nitpick over the passwords.
Making yet another appearance in this video, but in a different category, is Ryan Coogler's Sinners, getting a substantial budget for his original horror film, which he made every penny count, along with Bong Joon-ho's Mickey 17, which cost a lot more than that film ended up making in the box office. But outside of those two, we also got films like The Electric State, which bolstered an absurd $300 million budget that Netflix so callously threw at the Rousseau brothers. And although I don't hate the film as much as so many other people in the world, that one was most definitely ill-advised. Or Eddington, which is another film from Ari Aster, where A24 gave him free rein to go all out on a 2020 political satire starring Joaquin Phoenix and Pedro Pascal. More on Pascal in a bit. This movie is absolutely absurd in the best ways possible, but was definitely divisive to say the least. What else could we expect from a political satire about the year 2020? Apple also bet big on Joseph Kosinski with F1, and unlike some others on this list, this one was fairly profitable along with Sinners. And then there's Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another, which will almost certainly win Best Picture this year, which also ended up very high on my list of favorite films of the year. This, along with Sinners, ended up also being some of my favorite theater experiences this year, as they were both projected in 70mm IMAX formats. Love to see it in that way. And you know what? Why not throw in Frankenstein to this list as well? Netflix is always down to throw all the money in the world to let directors like Guillermo del Toro make his movie as big as he wanted it to be. So this also qualifies for this category. But speaking of Pedro Pascal, was it the year for our favorite film zaddy?
Hi.
Wow. You know how to do the math, don't you? You are what we call a unicorn. An impossible fantasy.
Pedro Pascal started off the year with a hell of a drive in The Last of Us Season 2, had a small role in the indie Sundance film Freaky Tales, which very little people saw, but he was very much in, and as previously mentioned, he was in Eddington with a smaller yet substantial role. The marketing for the materials heavily relied on everyone's love for Pedro Pascal, but I'm sure some were already sick of his face by this point, and of course on the larger scale, he starred as the stretchy man in Fantastic Four: First Steps. Gotta love Pedro Pascal, and he had a hell of a run this year. And that's not even to mention his brief appearances in that weird AirPods TV ad from Spike Jonze, along with his appearance in Saturday Night Live.
Hey man, came all this way, had to explain, direct from Reynaldo. Matthew's my guy, said he's not bi, but we did hook up though.
Also, technically, there are 2 Pedro Pascals in that AirPods ad, the happy one and the sad one, so let's just retroactively put that in the dual performance section as well. And I think this one you can technically apply to any year, but was it truly the year of franchise filmmaking?
People were going to die!
Hey, buddy, eyes up here.
It always seems to appear that franchises are on a downward trend, especially in recent years. So was this year an indication of the death of these franchises, or did they get a very much needed second chance? And let's start off with the biggest franchise, as I'd say the MCU won a good amount of goodwill back this year with the Thunderbolts and the Fantastic Four First Steps. Despite both of these films making an okay amount at the box office, it did do a good amount of damage control when it comes to the quality of these superhero films. And yes, we did have Captain America Brave New World, which was disappointing both critically and amongst audiences, but the MCU overall I feel like it's still in a slight upward swing. Here's to hoping Avengers Doomsday and Spider-Man Brand New Day are good. Please be good. The DCU, on the other hand, has earned an immense amount of goodwill with James Gunn's Superman and Peacemaker Season 2. It looks like a bright start to revitalize a franchise that was heading towards collapse with the ever-changing leadership behind Warner Brothers. Here's to also hoping that Netflix doesn't ruin it all. Horror franchises, on the other hand, were a bit of a mixed bag. Final Destination Bloodlines revitalized that series to a great degree. Black Phone 2 was solid, which I honestly wouldn't mind getting a third film to continue that story, and I'm a little bit more mixed on 28 Years Later, as that film had a lot to love, but also took a couple extremely large swings that for me were misses. But critically and financially, that film did incredibly well, and we'll have a sequel to that film in just next month. The Predator franchise, which started out as horror, is also killing it with Dan Trachtenberg's Predator Badlands and Killer of Killers, bringing that series back into the limelight. But on the flip side of things, we also had Fear Street, which probably should have been left alone as a solid trilogy on Netflix. The Strangers Chapter 2 was just as laughably bad as Chapter 1, and Five Nights at Freddy's 2 continued to be fun for fans of the game, but the quality of those films are just simply not great. And most disappointingly, The Conjuring Last Rites left that series on a very mid-note. Franchises that will likely continue due to their success in this past year include How to Train Your Dragon, which featured a solid live-action remake, Now You See Me, Now You Don't, which was surprisingly fun from a series that thrives off of being just good enough, Zootopia, which had a really fun sequel which made all the money in the world, and Wicked for Good, which left room for more stories to tell in the world of Oz. As for the ones that I hope will die, despite the odds being very much against my favor, we have Minecraft, which is one of the worst films that I saw throughout the year, at least in my opinion. I hated that movie, but we're bound to get so many more of those films, which just why. Jurassic World Rebirth was also better than the past couple of Jurassic films, but honestly it might be time to let the dinosaurs stay extinct. And of course Tron Ares, which killed any and all hope that I had for a good follow-up to the highly underrated Tron Legacy. So jury's still out on whether franchise filmmaking has entirely plateaued, or if there's still some life in some of these franchises. But now let's get into the fun one, the one that I think actually probably defines the year more than anything else, despite President Redacted's claim that woke was found dead in a ditch. Was 2025 actually the year of woke?
Our country will be woke no longer.
You know we getting away.
A white person in a jungle? I am right here if you guys ever want to have a girls' night. A little Prosecco and pals.
Child, I saw one with a cat in a stroller.
Mama rules.
One of Them Days kicked off this year, which was basically Friday with women, so I bet these sexists had a field day complaining about that one. Great movie, by the way. Companion was also kind of woke. I mean, there is some pro-AI propaganda there, but hey, women deserve to have their autonomy, so that's pretty woke. Captain America Brave New World was labeled as woke long before it was released, despite its severe lack in making any impactful political statements, although it did feature a president who turned into a red monster that attacked fellow Americans when his crime-ridden past came back to haunt him. He even destroyed a section of the White House, which surprisingly came true in real life. Mickey 17 continued the trend of President Redacted allegories, with Mark Ruffalo playing an absolute buffoon of an authoritarian capitalist leader. Pretty woke. Snow White was also played by Rachel Zegler, which you know started riots across the country. Sinners had Michael B. Jordan killing the Klan, which probably offended someone, as absurd as that may sound. What else? So Eddington, of course. The whole inciting incident of Eddington was because of the sheriff not wanting to wear a face mask and was ridiculed because of that. Ballerina was just John Wick with a woman. Can't have that in Redacted's America. Lilo and Stitch, I mean, that it was Disney, so I'm sure complaints of some sort riddled that film with needless controversy. How to Train Your Dragon race-swapped Astrid. Superman was pro-Palestine. Love to see it. One battle after another literally began with freedom fighters freeing immigrants from a detention center. The Perfect Neighbor was a true crime found footage horror documentary that showed the true dangers of having a crazy white lady as a neighbor. Pretty woke. The Long Walk featured a dystopian future America where kids from every single state sign up for a contest to earn money at the cost of their own lives. The real-life upcoming Patriot games don't seem too far off from this now, does it? The Running Man was about the gamification of wealth and class disparity with a focus on false propaganda. Wicked for Good, like its predecessor, was filled with themes of racial injustice and the dangers of propaganda as well. And Zootopia 2, which was also just one large metaphor for racism, gentrification, and colonialism. Also, there's Avatar Fire and Ash, but it still isn't quite beating the white savior allegation, so maybe not that one as much as the others. So, between all of these trends, whether that was the dual performances, Stephen King, directors given blank checks to do whatever in the world they want to do, Pedro Pascal, franchise filmmaking, or the year of woke, it's truly hard to tell what 2025 in film was truly about. But hey, maybe 2025 in film was really about the friends we made along the way. Subscribe for more videos just like this.